Hello, and welcome to Telling Stories. This is the second part of the Meiko Satomura story, which began some 4 months ago. I'm going to try and dot these throughout the year. On the Mondays we have no wrestling available to review, and we should be back next week with a regular Trupani show. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the continuing story of Meiko Satomura as she rises through the ranks of GAEA in the mid-1990s. Having learnt on the job in GAEA and in WCW, and with occasional jobs out for other promotions, Satomura was GAEA through and through. Dropping into the role as the next big thing, and as the day-to-day leader of the GAEA dojo, she clearly had the it factor. But everyone needs a little push. Her opportunity to shine as a wrestler still wisely developed in this tag team run with Sonoki Kato throughout 1998. Despite being the champions, they were up and down in the win-loss strokes, but they kept mixing it with the Joshi legends. Mayumi Ozaki and Suga Sato would team up to defeat Satomura and Kano not long after LCO had beaten them. But Satomura was also catching on as a singles draw, teaming with Chigusa Nagaya for the big grudge match showdown with Ozaki and Aja Kong in April, and making a surprise New Japan date to wrestle Chieko Nagashima, another of the guy's excellent homegrown talents, to a 10-minute time-limit draw. When the pair had a rematch early in 99, Satomura would win over the more Gaia-friendly 30-minute time limit. In fact, this is where her momentum began for the rest of 1999. She would clearly need to go up in the world, and she'd proven her worth time and time again, but GAEA were drawing big houses with some Joshi veterans who had come over from AJW, having done all they could in the company. Perhaps the biggest name of which was Aja Kong. Aja had become a title threat in May of 99. She challenged the then and two-time champion Chigusa Nagaya to the title and came up trumps. Though it may not have seemed like it then, Kong would become Satomura's defining opponent over the length of her career. Their first title showdown would be in September of 1999. But they would tangle before that bout in both GAEA and Ozaki's heel stable-based offshoot, Ozu Academy. In a series that would define GAEA's world title, telling a gripping and hard-hitting story. In fact, the first encounter at Yokohama Bunker Gymnasium, Kong would come out the winner. There would be more opportunities, as Satomura was there for the long term. It wasn't just Kong who had been her benchmark. As explored in the last episode of this series, her matches with Akira Hokuto would address her state in the wrestling world. Each time she would sit a step closer but never quite make it, until a match in November of 2001. The match opened hard and heavy, with a respectful handshake turned into a slapping contest by Hokuto. A mistake she instantly regretted, as Satomura was as intense as she had ever been. She hit hard and often, taking the lead in the early going with a series of vicious kicks, rounded off with a Pele kick for good measure. Surviving the onslaught, Hokuto looked to control, as was always her game plan. She grabbed Meiko by the hair and let loose with an almighty open hand slap, but Satomura kept firing back. This was high-stakes Joshi at its finest, intense and hard-hitting from the opening bell. Hokuto handled Satomura up into the fireman's carry and snapped off a Death Valley driver, then tried to take control with an armbar. When that didn't work, she resorted to knees to the temple to slow down the ever-charging Satomura. It worked, but Satomura was playing possum and launched Hokuto across the ring with a released German suplex and went back to her preferred wear-down kicks. Hokuto retaliated with hellacious slaps to the head, and that is how it went back and forth with heavy, heavy strikes. When Satomura finally downed Hokuto, the crowd roared in approval. They then went to the mat, when Satomura missed a heel kick and tried to convert it into a reverse cross arm breaker, but Hokuto used her momentum and applied a leg bar, torquing up Satomura's knee in an effort to slow her truly dangerous kicks. Satomura crawled for the ropes, carrying all of Hokuto's weight. Hokuto then went for a main submission maneuver, the Scorpion Deathlock. Satomura had other ideas. She kicked her off and tried a deathlock of her own, but Hokuto reversed that into an STF, adding a Fujiwara armbar for good measure. Meiko got the rope break to a round of supportive applause. The fans didn't want to see this one end. Like a lot of Hokuto's matches, there wasn't a picture-perfect classic wrestling exhibition. It was a fight. As she dominated, she used heavy Yakuza kicks to subdue Satomura, offering pain and humiliation as was her wont. The finest heel of her generation, she was not going to let this go easily. She gave Satomura her signature top rope missile dropkick, then a second, sending Satomura sprawling across the ring. Then came the dangerous Queen Bomb. She was sensing the end. Both maneuvers only garnered a 2 count. Satomura was too strong for her, and the look of resignation on Hokuto's face showed her frustration. She went for her husband's favourite submission, the Sasaki Stranglehold. trying to finish off Meiko, but Satomura found the ropes yet again. In the following exchange, Satomura delivered the Death Valley Bomb and went for her surefire submission winner, the cross arm lock, struggling to get Hokuto in the hold. In a bizarre twist, Hokuto managed to struggle free, but found herself in her husband's own finishing maneuver, bang in the middle of the ring. Satomura hung on for grim life. Hokuto found the ropes and some help from her seconds as they pushed her to her feet. She rolled out to gather herself, but Satomura delivered a flying forearm as she stood on the ring apron, trying to get back in the ring. She trapped Hokuto's arm and delivered a perfect Northern Lights suplex, but only for a 2. The pair were going through each other's finishes at an alarming rate, and then Hokuto's husband's. Then his best friend, Hirohase. Another released German set up Hokuto to be frog slashed, but she got a boot spin time to meet Satomura on the way down. Hokuto slammed Satomura with a reverse Northern Lights bomb, banging her on the mat with a sickening thud, but she kicked out at 2 with authority. A backdrop driver and another 2 count. She ran Satomura into the ropes and tried for a Yakuza kick, but she was caught giving a shockingly heavy kick to the thigh as she crumpled to the mat, and an even heavier kick to the head. As she came to, Hokuto dodged another Pele kick, but Satomura would not be denied, getting up from everything that had been thrown at her. The pair became so basic and desperate they started headbutting each other on their knees. Eventually they went to the floor, with Hokuto trying a crack smash from the top rope, but Satomura got out of the way, leaving her a hapless second to take the move and leaving Hokuto on the floor in a heap. Satomura stood over her fallen opponent and in a guttural rage screamed out in exultation. The fans roared back as she slapped herself back to life. Hokuto crawled back into the ring. Satomura was waiting and lifted her deadweight body onto her shoulders and dropped her with a Death Valley Bomb for another 2 count. Another stiff kick to the head and yet another 2. Another DVB, yet another 2. Satomura came closer and closer but couldn't put the Dangerous Queen away. Satomura gripped the stranglehold yet again. Hokuto just touched the ropes with a foot. A sliding knee got another 2 count, with Hokuto defiantly bridging out. Momentum came back to Hokuto slightly as she rose to her feet, but Satomura kept on her. Hokuto went for the Northern Lights Bomb, the vicious elevated pile driver that had made her name, but she didn't have the strength to lift her opponent. A second attempt scored, but she was too far away to make the cover. The referee started counting as both were on the floor in exhaustion. Her count went on and on and on, but it was Satomura who survived. Raising to her feet with another scream, she had done the impossible. She had beaten the legend that was Hokuto. This was a massive singles win for Satomura. Taming the Dangerous Queen with a knockout victory was the most important piece of the puzzle in her development to the main event. And it wasn't just wrestling fans who took an interest. Director Kim Longinotto was looking for a documentary project alongside a collaborator, Jana Williams. Thinking they could showcase the amazing female athletes in GAEA in a documentary, she was able to create an anthropological study of the GAEA dojo in action. It was a fascinating and incredibly honest portrayal of a hothouse educational environment. It was shown by the BBC, which gave GAEA and Satomura incredible impetus when it was aired. The film told the story of 3 levels of women involved. The film told the story of the 3 levels of the women involved: the owner of the company, Nagayo, the trainers led by Satomura, and the trainees best exemplified by Saka Takeuchi. I talked to Kim about the project, what she thought of Satomura, and the effect the film had on the wrestling industry. What were your first impressions of Meiko Satomura? I don't know if it comes through in the film or not, I hope it does, is that in order to be a true champion, in order to be a number 1 at something, you can be immediately that Satomura is going to be a huge star. I think it's a lot of things. It's not just ability, though you do have to be talented, but I'm really interested in sport anyways. I just watched Serena and Venus Williams play last night in the US Open, and was reflecting on what makes Serena great. It is the determination. It's something that Serena Williams has, an absolute determination to win at all costs, to be the absolute best, to be the strongest and the fittest to last, to be the longest out there, to win, and that's the real quality. That to me is what the whole film is about. You love Chibi, and you want her to do well, and you want her to succeed, but she hasn't got that thing you need to succeed, and it's more extreme in wrestling than any other sport. In a way, you have to have that instinct that you want to win above all else, that you're going to get the better of the other person. That is what it comes down to, and you will do absolutely anything to get there. And in a way, what you mean is you're always going to be the slightly apart from everyone else. You're going to be a slightly alone. You're not necessarily going to be popular with your peers. You're not going to be loved unreservedly. You are going to be admired and feared. You're going to have total adulation. You see it in Shigesato Nagayo. She loves the girls that she is coaching, but in a way she is quite abusive of them because she wants the best for them, and she sees this as the best way of doing it, like her father did with her. With Chibi, she goes too far. She's quite lonely. There's all of those things mixed up, really. She wants them to love her, but has this kind of way of trying to instill the killer instinct, and I don't think you can instill that in people. You either have got it, or you haven't. That is a tragedy. You can't instill that in people by the way you treat them. You have to have it or they don't, and Satomura has just got it. She's absolutely got it. We thought she was extraordinary. She was very young at the time, and she already knew, but she already had it. She was so young, and yet when you were in the ring filming her, she seems like this old wise person who is a champion. At the end of the film, because Satomura is the champion, even though there was just that one match we followed, because the film isn't about the individual person's career, it's about the new recruits. Is Chibi going to survive or not? Who Nagayo is? It's all about those things. For me though, I watched a champion. When I left, I remember saying Satomura is a champion. Chibi isn't going to survive, Satomura is. You can't do what Nagayo is trying to do. You can't make a champion. A champion has to make themselves. You can't help them, but Satomura had it. She absolutely had it. The other girls could see that and stood back from it. She is detached from the girls already. She is on her way. I can see that in the film. Her peers like Uematsu and Kato, both of whom have great careers but didn't reach the level Satomura has. They stand back from her. It does fascinate me as she has become the matriarchal figure of her own company now as a co-owner of Sendai Girls. To me, it's like she took all of that culture from the women of GAEA and the GAEA philosophy of pro wrestling and put it into Sendai Girls because the women that work there all seem to have that philosophy. Well, GAEA was an extraordinary organisation, said Kim, and you can see in the film that none of these new girls there could deal with workload. None of them. They all left. That's the only reason they stuck with Chibi. But they ran away, every single one of them. They are just in this shed cut off from everyone in Yokohama, working and working all day. Training. It is really awe-inspiring. It reminded me of Serena Williams growing up in the projects, a really tough housing estate, going on to really get beaten up on the tennis court, growing up with violence and shooting, and doing weights and building a body and being absolutely determined to survive and be the absolute top player. And now she's looking to be the greatest player ever. I always thought that those two, Meiko and Serena, were very similar about them. They're both so absolutely beautiful, charismatic, determined, who invoke fear in their opponents, and both of them have raised the level of their sport, so much they have driven other people to do so much better. You know, Serena and Venus had galvanised the world of women's tennis. I'm sure Meiko has done much the same in wrestling. I think what is important and why I'm so happy you are writing this piece is not just an inspiration for people who are going to wrestling, it's an inspiration for people to say, look, I can be more like Satomura, I can survive, I can win, I can do it, I want to be the best. It's the mystery of that makes someone want to be the best. What is it that drives them on for 10, 15, 20 years? Serena Williams is 33 now. It's unheard of. She's still going, and she's still the world's number one, and she's probably going to win the US Open. Unfortunately, Serena didn't win that year, but she did look majestic up until the semi-finals. And I really hope, and she's an absolute genius. You say Satomura was 17 when she came back from the US. I never felt like she was younger than me. It felt like I was looking at a champion. Look at Chibi, and she looks like a little girl. As were all the other girls in the dojo. They were just little girls. I hope you uncover what it makes to be a champion. Why is she one in a generation? Why is Serena Williams one in a generation? I said, it's fascinating to me because when she came along, women's wrestling in Japan was at its hottest, and the generation before her were possibly the greatest wrestlers ever. Nagayo, Linus Asuka, Toshi Yamada, Akira Hokuto, Manami Toyota, LCO, Aja Kong. All these women who in any other era, in any other company, would have been flat-out main event stars for their whole careers. The bar that they set was just so ridiculously high. The matches they put together haven't been top since, and it was 20 years ago. Satomura grew up in that environment, and GAEA was her heroine, and it left me the impression that Satomura wants to be the best pro wrestler she can possibly be. Yes, Nagayo was such a heroine to all of them, but that's what you get, and that's what we saw, and that's what we admired. Sport is not just the sport, and why are we all obsessed with sport? You can watch Andy Murray or Tiger Woods, you can watch football, and it's not when Man City did, you get all these best players money could buy, it's some magic that happens. Tiger had this injury and he hasn't won since, so it's mental. It's to do with this incredible drive and will, and with Tiger it's a loss in his confidence, but it's so interesting, he keeps saying, I'm back, and he's not back. But if he does it, he will be a miracle. But with Satomura, it was there in a 17-year-old. I want to know about that mental journey from the age of 8 or 7. What is it that brought her to that 17-year-old? But what is it that keeps her going to strive to be the best? And I replied, I just watched the match where she won the first AAW title in GAEA and she's 22. And at 22, she's been running the dojo for a couple of years. She has responsibilities well beyond her age, and she's wrestling in front of a massive crowd, and she walks out like she owns the place. She's wrestling one of the toughest women that ever lived, who had done everything in pro wrestling that you could do at the time, and they've knocked 7 bells out of one another, but Satomura still looks like the champion at the end. The match is one good story, but you need to ask the question, why? She hasn't gone the traditional route, which is such a pressure on the girls to do, to get married. There is that Japanese phrase, a girl is like a Christmas cake. When you're 24, you are stale. She's given up everything to be the best. She hasn't stopped when she could have done. She must have had enough money to live on, so what is driving her forward to be the best and stay the best? And then go on and on and on. She's an amazing athlete. Before we went away, people going, oh, women's wrestling. They imagined it was going to be some mud wrestling, sort of cabaret thing. But when you see the training that goes into it and you see how skilled they are, I think the people in the UK were very shocked and surprised how fit, talented and skillful they are. I think if you look at what was going on in mainstream wrestling at the time of the film, it wasn't very female friendly. Not so much now because it's changed largely because of Joshua influence, but I think it wasn't a very female positive. It was bra and panties matches and things like that, and it didn't appeal to the people who wanted to be athletes. Now, I'd have hated that. What I liked about them was that they had muscles and they were athletes, and they make you go, wow. When Satomura does these amazing backflips and scissor kicks, and you see Chibi and she's saying that's not how you do it. But Chibi wasn't a star, and the kindest thing you have to tell her was to leave. But they were trying so hard to make her. They just didn't have the recruits coming in. That sweet girl comes in with her mum, and you can see, no, you're not right. I replied, yes, I still see it today in some debuts when I see new girls in Stardom who are there to sell posters and t-shirts, and I'm thinking, you don't have the weight or body type for this to work, and they just plough through them. There will be 5 debuts in the year and maybe 1 left at the end. Kim replied, I think Satomura are beautiful though, but I did keep in touch with Chibi for a bit, but she didn't last long, did she? Not for long after the documentary. She didn't have it. She didn't have that it, and it's 1 in a million. I'm really proud of Meiko. She went away way beyond any of my expectations. I replied, when we see Satomura now, her in-ring presence is a very stoic person, like a female Clint Eastwood almost. Do you think that softer moments in the film were able to soften her public image against what she did in the ring and endeared her to an audience who watched the film? Yes, you have to have that, replied Kim. Courage is only the courage with fear, otherwise you are just a psychopath or a machine and you become the Hollywood Clint Eastwood kind of character. What I loved about Satomura is that she is a young girl as well, but she's putting so much behind her because she wants to be the best. To me, that makes her stronger and more interesting. The last interview in the GAEA is what makes her softer. If you just had her this tyrant that was dominating the girls, it wouldn't have worked. But it's so interesting to know that she wanted her dad to love her, and she wants the girls to love her, and that she's trapped in this role of the trainer that she can't show any emotion. That's what makes her so much more interesting. What Hollywood does is you have the Joker, Jack Nicholson and Batman, and you don't get to know much about them. They never change. But what you can see with Satomura is a little behind the mask. But you have to have a mask in wrestling because your opponent needs to be afraid of you. What I liked about Satomura was what she did was so beautiful. I don't like watching what my parents watched, which was mostly on the mat. It's like being submission torture. I love her athleticism. It's like Olympic gymnasts. It's just so beautiful. I'd like to thank him 10 years ago for speaking to me when I was a very, very minor professional wrestling journalist, because it gave me so much cachet in the wrestling journalism world. But that's an aside. Back to the story. Back in the ring, all roads led to Kong, and in 2001 Satomura got another shot at the AAAW Championship. In the midst of a second reign as champion, by this point Kong was a bona fide superstar. Her run in AJW had begun in '86, where she instantly stood out among the swimsuit wearing mohawked mega monster heel in the mold of her then on-screen mentor Dump Matsumoto. She'd broken out of that role to lead her heel stable Jungle Jack, and had finally risen to the top as our heir apparent of Bull Nakano to become WWWA champion, the highest position AJW had to offer. With the ascension of Manami Toyota to that rank, she had moved on to try new things, including experimental hook and shoot style of Arceon, a company she had helped establish, but now she was the top dog in GAEA, and it was Satomura's turn to chase. The date would be set for Kawasaki, December the 12th, 2001, for another title challenge from Satomura. Could she overcome the monster, 2-time champion Kong? The fans of Kawasaki, who love their brawling and violence, were about to find out, and they would not be disappointed. The coverage of the match itself began with the backstage preparation of Satomura, offering a short prayer as her music hit, then letting out a scream of defiance. She headed to the ring with a look of confidence and swagger. She walked to the ring like she owned it, the only attitude to have when you're facing, quite frankly, the best monster heel wrestling has ever created. Ring entrance and climbed to the top rope, letting out another roar. The fans, the GAEA faithful who had nurtured her as their own, roared back in approval. Game time. Kong came to the ring, as always with her true trash cans, painted in Kong face paint colours. While any wrestling superstar has to show a decline over the years, it was clear that after 13 years of the toughest ring wars imaginable, Kong still hadn't lost a step. 29 years old then, and still in her awesome prime, she looked like she could go another 13 years, and indeed she has. We didn't know that then, although you could see she was an awesome presence. She towered over Satomura, and the GAEA fans called out her name in shrill mantra, hoping for the best for their favourite. During the announcement, the usual flurry of paper ribbons that met the participants were deep red, filling the ring with a clear message to the champion. Satomura was as over could be. The match opened with a telling sight. Aja was trying to finish it early, aiming her spinning back fist at Satomura's head, but Meiko dodged again and again until she went for a kick. Kong, who had been one of the pioneers of martial arts in wrestling as a hybrid in Joshi, caught her, drove her into the corner and proceeded to land forearms into the chest of Satomura. Satomura retaliated when she found separation, landing with a flying forearm, then a series of kicks, and an axe kick on a kneeling Kong. Kong would go back into the groove when she finally swatted Satomura off the apron with a running lariat. This was going to be no walk in the park. This was going to be no walk in the park defence for the veteran. When they got to the floor, surprisingly, it was Satomura who took over on the master brawler, forearming her to the floor from the top rope, but Kong came back with the backdrop driver and hurling her into the first row. As Meiko gathered her wits, Aja picked up the guardrail and hurled it at her. However, in the follow-up exchanges, it would be Satomura who took over, delivering a Death Valley bomb on the floor to yelps of delight from the adoring fans. She followed that up by hurling a row of chairs at Kong. The consummate technician had learned a lot when it came to the ways of main event brawling. Kong retaliated with her trusty trash cans, bouncing them off Satomura's skull. As the referee struggled to regain control, Kong pile drove Satomura through a table before the pair continued brawling back to the ring, with Satomura on the receiving end of the punishment. The ref refused to count a brainbuster from Kong, as Satomura had been dumped on one of the trash cans. As Aja remonstrated with the referee, Meiko gathered her wits and came back with a pele kick, a move she popularised long before the likes of AJ Styles took it on. The comeback was short-lived. Kong delivered another brainbuster, but Satomura defiantly bridged out. A pile driver also failed to do the trick. The big moves were coming thick and fast as Satomura landed a signature Death Valley bomb, but Kong got out on a 2. Kong blocked Scorpio rising and landed a spinning backfist of her own, but again, only for a 2. Kong started showing signs of frustration, dumping Satomura and delivering an elbow drop from the top rope, but it was still only a 2. She signalled for another backfist, but Satomura blocked it with a pele kick and took over with palm strikes, knocking Kong off her feet with a solid combination. Another axe kick, another Death Valley bomb, another kick out. Was there nothing this woman can't stand? Another Death Valley bomb, another 2. Satomura slammed the mat in frustration. A third DVB and another kick out. She tried to do what looked like the impossible, lifting Aja's bulky frame into the fireman's carry position she needed to set up the bomb, and then she attempted to climb the ropes. Kong came too fast enough to stop her and delivered another spinning backfist and collapsed in a heap. Another backfist, another 2. The pair began exchanging blows in the corner before Satomura got enough separation to hit a frog splash. But again, it was only 2. The pair had produced so many near falls by sheer weight of numbers the crowd was on the edge of its collective seats. Satomura ran again for the Scorpio rising, but Kong caught her and hit her on their own Death Valley bomb to add insult to injury. Satomura proudly, but obviously exhausted, bridged out of the pin attempt. In the ensuing scrap, Kong managed to grab a sleeper and scissored her young challenger, banged to rights in the middle of the ring. Satomura eventually found the ropes, but the die had been set. Or had it? Satomura, groggy and coming to, saw an opportunity when Kong called her shot. She raised a hand in the air and yelled for the back fist. Satomura caught her arm, pulled on an arm breaker and went for the Death Valley bomb. Once more, Kong kicked out on instinct, but she was still not in a great position to do anything, as Satomura ran towards her, stood on her knee and delivered the perfect axe kick. Scorpio had risen, right down the middle of Aja Kong's skull. A 3 count delivered the inevitable. Satomura was now the AAAW champion. The crowd roared its approval. She was the youngest champion of Joffrey's major title holders at 22, and now the Joshi world was hers. Thank you for listening to Telling Stories, Meiko Satomura, Part 2, Scorpio Rising. My name's James Trupany. You can find me at Sheriff Star on Twitter and on Blue Sky, and on Instagram at SheriffStarTX. You can find The Trupany Show on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky as Trupany Show. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back next week.